Let's talk about Chelsea and their hierarchy. Have they got concerns over other teams in their area of the table trying to pick off their players? Kovacic possibly going to Manchester City. Apparently today, Mason Mount, it's been reported, has agreed personal terms with Manchester United. Why on earth would Chelsea be happy and willing to sell one of their better players to someone that they'll be competing for a Champions League place with?
Well, they probably don't include Mason Mount in that particular characterisation.
Well, that would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? Bearing in mind he's twice the Player of the Year and last year was only second to assists to Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Because you were Player Year previously, it doesn't carry on in perpetuity, does it?
Well, it's carrying an injury this year, which is the reason he hasn't performed.
And that's fine. And clearly they've got a view on things. And to answer your question, you might disagree with that view. But if their view is that he isn't one of their best players, then your view is academic, isn't it? Because if they don't think that he's one of their better players, we can all bark at them and say he is. If they don't, it'll explain the reasons why they're less concerned about him going to other football clubs.
Would you trust their judgment?
If I was availed of all the facts that they may be, and if I was availed and abreast of all the circumstances in which they're making these decisions, then maybe I would be. If I was sat there looking at Mason Mount thinking, I think he's a decent player, but I don't think he's spectacular. If they think they've got something better in the locker, and ultimately Mason Mount is asking for £250,000 a week and I don't want to pay it, and this is my last opportunity to resolve the situation to command any sort of fee, I'd take all of those factors in. I'd look at it and go, do I worry about my competition? I believe I am the competition, so I don't tend to worry about the competition. So I don't really care, within reason, what other people do. All I will be able to control in the end is there's a passage of time and an inevitability about it. If I can't get a deal done with him, he's gone in a year's time. So he'll be benefiting, or 2 years, he'll be benefiting my opposition at some point. The only thing I have at this moment in time is some control. And if I don't worry about those sort of things, or have the necessity to worry about it, I've got 2 years left on my contract because I thought it was 1, I would do neither, and the player would be staying at Chelsea and doing as he's told.
Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester United all interested. Successive Chelsea managers have picked him in the team, and the England manager thinks he's great and always includes him. Would that give you an indication that maybe the majority of people at the top end of the game are thinking that he's probably worth a part of...
Well, so if you want to make this about... So here we go. If you want to make this about Todd Boehly and we want to characterise it, there's somebody else making the decisions. In comes Mauricio Pochettino. They've pleaded, begged, cajoled and persuaded Pochettino to come in. So if you live in the world of Narnia where you think Pochettino turns around to Boehly and says, but I really want to keep Mason Mount, and Boehly says, no, you can't, then you're away with yourself. What Gareth Southgate does is an irrelevance, as far as I'm concerned, because he doesn't win anything. What Chelsea's job is to do is to win something. Maybe Gareth Southgate wins, Principal's Waistcoat of the Year award, but he doesn't win tournaments for the English football team when we have opportunities to do so.
There's not many people that have, though.
Well, really. I don't care what other people do. You brought him into the conversation, so I'm talking about the analysis around what you suggest needs to be done with Mason Mount. Now, going on to the equation of Mason Mount and where he goes and what he doesn't do, well, look, I'm not suggesting if your characterisation is it's Boehly, then you are discounting the value of Pochettino.
I'm not well, in one sense saying it's anything to do with just Boehly.
If Pochettino wants him...
Well, that's not true, because as I understand it, as soon as they appointed him as manager, the first thing he did was say, let's try and get a deal done for him. But by that time, I think Chelsea caused too many problems and disrespected him, and he decided he didn't want to do it.
Nothing is unresolvable. Don't live in some silly world.
He's got so many options. Why is it? Why does he have to take it just because Chelsea offer him a new contract now?
One to do is he's got 2 options in this instance. Yeah. One to do as he's told, and one to do what Chelsea allow him to do, which amount to the same thing, because he's got 2 years left on his contract. So with due respect to the player and due respect to the football club, if Chelsea want to retain him, then that's what they will do. Now, if they want to retain him in a happy frame of mind and a balanced frame of mind, then ultimately they'll find a solution that makes him comfortable with the finances that he thinks he's entitled to, alongside what Chelsea think he's worth. And with that in mind, that will be the likely outcome. Now, with Pochettino, again, if you think that nothing is unreversible, I tell you what clears people's minds and concentrates the reality and makes everybody feel better about themselves: money. It changes the direction of people's thinking. If they suddenly went back to Mason Mount and said, you know what, you're absolutely right. We're going to give you 250 grand a week, and we're going to give you a one-off bonus and backdate it because we've been piddling about for 6 months.
But that's the issue. They haven't got the money, have they? Because they're concerned about the FFP because of the amount of money that they've spent.
Listen, the wages are what the wages are. What you're then equating it to is a transfer obligation upon them to try and meet the financial fair play situation they've created for themselves. Don't forget they've bedded some of that down by long-term contracts, which have reduced the depreciation side of things. So they haven't got the same impact of of depreciation that other clubs will have when they've got players being bought for 50, 60 million quid on 4-year contracts.
Yeah.
So they factor some of that in.
But they also haven't got the money that would usually come from the Champions League or the Europa League.
No, and ultimately they will have to make certain decisions, whether it's Ruben Loftus-Cheek, whether it's Callum Hudson-Odoi, to be able to bridge some of the gaps on the depreciation criteria that they've got. I think if they want Mason Mount, in the same way, if they wanted, you could make the same argument about Antonio Rudiger when Tuchel was in control of the situation. He didn't seem to be too bothered about keeping Antonio Rudiger, did he? And people were suggesting he was the best.
I think it actually is just 1 year left on his contract with an option. But
well, that was my thought.
Ultimately, if you're in a situation where you think you've got a saleable asset and you're Chelsea at this moment in your time, you spent so much money.
Yeah.
Is this a sort of just an identifying of this is the guy that we can get the most money for, and it's pure profit because he came through our academy?
Well, there could be an element of that, but I would think that they're going to get, if they get into the Champions League next year by having a fully geared team, which I think they will, and Mason Mount is a component part of that, they will get as much from their success as they might get from the capitalisation of the transfer fee that they get from Mason Mount when they sell him. Because ultimately they're still going to buy players this summer. Pochettino's not walking into a football squad that he thinks is the fix for everything that he needs. He's going to want a centre-forward, isn't he? We already understand there's a centre-forward lined up that's going to cost them money. I think the Mason Mount conversation is twofold. It is a 1-year contract, so they've been brought to a situation where there's no real timelines for them to be able to deal with it in a way that they might want to. This option, is it in favour of the player or is it in favour of the club? It must be in favour of the club, I suspect.
Yeah, it usually is.
So Chelsea are in control of their own destiny, and who doesn't think they are is uninformed media.
Nkunku, you mentioned, who is coming in for Chelsea, so there is going to be at least one more signing, and as far as we understand it, they are looking around to strengthen that squad in certain areas, as they would be anyway. Kovacic could be leaving, but he could be going to Manchester City, and as you as a former owner, you must have thought about this when you're selling players, or would you think about this when you're selling players? If selling it to a direct rival, someone who's competing in the same area as the table as you, if you were going for promotion, let's say from the Championship, and you were up against someone, I don't know, let's say Sheffield United, would you sell one of your best players to that club?
Depends upon my reasons for
doing
doing it. Depends upon how. Again, you're characterising Mason Mount as one of their best players. If they don't characterise him that way, that then defeats their argument. If you look at the argument that some people say, what in God's name would Man City help Arsenal with the Zinchenko and Jesus?
Does Mount make Manchester United better? If your answer to that question is yes, then you're strengthening them whether you regard him as a key player in your team or not.
It depends how he plays for Man United and what system they play and how he settles in, and ultimately how he reacts. There's a whole raft of if and ors buts. I think it probably would strengthen Manchester United, yes. But given you're in a situation where you've only got a certain amount of jurisdiction because time is not against you, what would you prefer to do? Sell the player commercially to a lesser football club that will pay lesser money, or sell it to a bigger football club that will pay more money but ultimately might put you in a slight position of jeopardy? Which would you back? I don't know in that equation, but I would also look at myself and go, what's my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats? All of them are reduced transfer fees, obligations to the player, the consequences of my decision-making process, or I back myself. I really don't care what the opposition do.
I wonder what the Chelsea fans think about it. 03717 223344. Do you mind selling Mason Mount? Do you mind selling Mason Mount, Mateo Kovacic, to rivals at the top of the table? Does it bother you? Kovacic started 27 of Chelsea's 50 matches this season. He missed 8 games due to injury or illness during that time, but he has been a key player in some of the big games. What do you think about it? 03717 223344.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the TalkSport app and on your smart speaker. TalkSport.